Hello and welcome to this week's Betting People with a very apt guest, a very appropriate one, because we have the Racing Post betting editor, Keith Melrose. Keith, thank you very much for joining us.
Not at all. A pleasure to be here.
I'm going to go straight in with a punting question, which is that when you started betting semi-seriously or seriously, what mistakes did you initially make?
Well, it depends what we term by when I started betting seriously or semi-seriously, because I've always been making mistakes, still am to this day. I remember when I was very much starting out, when I was, basically just turned 18 and betting. I made a lot. I was very much a trends follower on the big races and learned in time pretty quickly that you've got to be a little bit more flexible with how you approach those sorts of things. And I think when I started, or maybe if I regarded seriously or semi-seriously, as when I started working in racing properly, which would have been after I left university. I was very loyal to horses. I still am to a little degree, but nowhere near what I was. If a horse had a bit of form that I liked, if a horse had done something that I liked at some point in its career, it would take me a long time for that effect to decay. When I realised now absolutely the opposite of that. I found handicap ratings in particular helped me get out of that habit a little bit. You've got to decide whether a performance is still relevant to a horse and do it relatively quickly, because if it's not running well, the handicapper himself's going to drop it. And you're going to find yourself going, well, I've got to back this horse, even though, it's 25 and bang out of form, but 3 runs ago it did this 85 or whatever. And you learn pretty quickly to do it that way. But, it's never something that's completely left me. I think every punter's like that. I think we all find that our early flaws never fully go away. But, we'll have to just get good at controlling them best we can, like just with our general characteristics, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I agree with that. Certainly, there'll be some mistakes that I keep making. Was there anything that you found worked particularly well for you that you've kept through to the day? You said you use handicap ratings a lot. Was there any other things that you picked up on?
Yeah, well, the ratings themselves and how they're arrived at was a big thing for me as well, because obviously, like anybody, I'd seen them written down
Yeah.
in front of me, and you see them as a figure. Then when I started working in racing, my first job in racing properly was at Timeform, and you worked with handicappers there, worked with some of the best handicappers I've ever worked with, guys like Matt Taylor and people like that who just, I thought it was a lot more precise than it was. A lot of handicapping, they won't tell you this, but a lot of handicapping is feel. And, there's a little bit of, there are handicappers that are tip what you fancy types. And that's fine as long as you're extremely good. And luckily, a lot of these guys were. And the things you pick up from them, it's always about, there's one of the things I picked up from some of these guys and talking to them, like you would honestly socialize with these people, you'd be down at the pub with them at night, and you'd realize pretty soon there's an individual horse has about 30, 40, 50 characteristics that could be applicable. And the key to being actually a good punter, generally speaking, just irrespective of ratings or anything like that, is finding out the 3 or 4 that are going to be pertinent on this day in particular. And with some horses, it's easy. You knew exactly what the pertinent things to know about tidal bay were, for instance.
Yeah.
But there are other horses that, it might be different on different days. And there's some horses that, and it's just picking out and having the knowledge in the field to find out what is pertinent to the horse on that day that really sums up its chance of winning that race and therefore determines whether it's worth betting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know plenty of old favourites where we can point out how they're going to run. I keep thinking back to Mad Moose, even though usually the favourites he never ended up starting. Now, one of the things I've noticed recently, sort of as I've grown through a punting or tipping career, is that you get certain times for prices to go, and we'll come back to that later in the interview. But personally, do you ever prefer time either to tip or to bet when it comes to racing, at least?
Tipping is a really hard question. It's one we always discuss, to be honest. It's a discussion I've had with just about every tipster at the Racing Post. When would you like to tip? Somebody like Tom Siegel basically won't. He just, with prices, he just goes, well, I'm tipping. We're all judged to SP at the Post, and it's very difficult. When it's in the sort of horses I would bet, though, if I'm looking the day before, which we are when we write our tipping copy, they're the types of market that price. If that horse is, if today's the day for that horse, there's a good chance it's going to go off a lot shorter than the price you're getting it, 6 o'clock the night before or whatever. I'm quite fortunate, to be honest, I'm not a sort of punter that puts down masses of stakes. It's going to get me horrendously noticed by trading floors, so I can get away with a bit of evening before action still with certain firms. And that's a time when I do like to bet if I can, if I see a price that I fancy. But for me, it is just the earlier the better. I'm all about trying to just beat SP. I seem to have a reasonable feel for SPs and what price horses will go off if they're fancied that day, and quite okay at beating that SP, and it's where I would make my money probably. So I would like to bet as early as possible. Others I know are totally different. Others want to go in for the Betfair market when it's mature. Yeah. Well, that's the only time, a lot of the time, that they can potentially get on if they're not
get matched properly.
If they have trouble getting on with bookies, it's the only time they can get on. Well, I couldn't do. I'm going to tell you now, I'm not good enough to do that. When the market is fully mature, to get on, and you're betting into, yes, you're betting into 103-4% books, but once that market's fully mature, everybody has had their say, including people that do things you don't. It's so difficult, and that's why I do think it's making it easy for myself betting as early as I can.
Yeah, I'm personally in agreement on the early evening before part. You pointed out there that the Racing Post gets judged to SP. Lots of people will be really interested, and I am too. Are there records, and are they publicly available for all the Racing Post tipsters?
Records are kept, yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if we make them all public, but we have to get them checked and verified independently. But I don't think they generally get made aware publicly because we do get judged to SP. We hold ourselves to that standard really, in a way that not many others do. You listen to services like Hugh Taylor, where the prices do go very, very quickly, but gets judged to those prices that he takes, and that is, that's a decision, an editorial decision, basically. We chose years ago to do it to SP. I'm always thinking of ways to change it. I've never thought of a one that actually works properly. I always thought about maybe judge it to what price is available at 10 o'clock in the morning, because that's, you can get good money on them. It's the opposite of the SP. What price is available at good money at the off? Well, what was the first price available at good money? The opposite way of looking at it. It might be a satisfactory way of doing it. I've met with some resistance on that one, but I think it might be the sort of best compromise, because advised prices, we all know what
happens to them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to call it a con either, but it's certainly it's a charmed position to be in, to be able to claim advised prices all the time. And whereas you really are a hostage to fortune if you're bet to SP, neither's correct. And we've chosen one, and others choose others, and that's why I get asked a lot by our teams if we can, what our sort of records are and what we can put them forward. And I the reason I say I wouldn't do that is because of the way we judge ourselves. Can't live up to people. If you're making 20% on SP every year, you're definitely not working as a tipster. You're definitely making it yourself, because you can get on those prices at whatever you want.
Lots of points there, and I think the last one was fair, but let's say fair enough, you judge to SP. Racing Post is the industry standard, and I'd presume you have the most well-read tipsters. I think we could say that and take that for granted.
I'm not sure we would actually. I mean, because our guys are behind the paywall, it makes a massive difference what's paywalled and what's not. We save our tipsters as premium service for subscribers, whereas I bet there's free services that get a lot better read.
Okay, that's actually a fair point. But even then, on those free services, like for instance, Sporting Life, you can go back, I think it's until 2017, to see each bet, admittedly to advised prices. Do you think there's a point in the future where you might come out, or the Post might come out and say, these are the records of our tipsters, they're to SP, here they are, and give the public that information with sort of the proviso that it's to SP and that's how we judge ourselves and we're sticky with it?
Yeah, it's a discussion that we have quite regularly. I probably, in my own head, would like to have it in a position where I'm happy with how we're being judged before we send it out, because as you see, none of us, we're all writing it the day before. None of us know what it is going to be or anything remotely like it. We are building new platforms now, and that would give us the option to do that. As I say, in a perfect world, I would like to wait until we got a point where I'm happy with the terms are being judged on. You do feel like you're sending the guys over the top a little bit with the FP situation, because because you know what, once it looks like it does, and which is inevitably going to be not as good as advised prices, people are going to come out and draw their conclusions from that. Which is why I prefer to wait if we could. But we have the means to do it, and we will. There's no question we'll do it at some point.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just to round off this first part of the interview, we're talking not only about your preferred time spec, but do you have races that you prefer over others? For instance, Thomas Gall's price-wise, although he tips across a broad range of events, I think I've heard him say in the past he prefers his big field handicaps. I know that's the case of Paul Keeley. Tom Collins is really, really good with his US action. I prefer graded races. Do you have any sort of sets of conditions where you think I'm much happier here compared to other races, or is it really a broad spectrum to you?
Oh, no, definitely the case. I mean, I would keep up with all good racing to the extent that I could bet on all good racing. But I am, in the columns I write and whatever, I've been a massive advocate of specialisation for punters. I would pick a division and stick with it. It's another thing that I got from working with guys that work on ratings and whatever. The guys were so across their group of horses. It made a massive, massive difference. And I do chasers mostly in the winter. Nowadays, I will do not to 115 handicaps and up, because once you get below that level, you are talking about horses where it's spin the wheel to which of its characteristics are most pertinent that day. We are getting into the realms of horses you can't really rely on.
Yeah.
So yeah, mostly handicap chases 115 and up. And in the summer, I keep my eye on with stayers. One of the things I took me longer to get than most was judging the pace by eye, which is why I've latched onto sectionals reasonably keenly, and always felt that chasing and staying races were races where you could just tell that pace that bit more easily, and I feel like I can do that. And yeah, so that's what I do in the summer to keep my eye on with the stayers mostly, and yet I would say that chasing is the thing that I specialise in most. I regard myself as fairly good at telling how if a horse fancies jumping, and it's not just about being a good jumper, isn't it? It's about if a horse is a keen jumper, as well. To the extent to which they fancy chasing a lot of the time, and that doesn't get talked about an awful lot because it would offend people if they did. Your horse doesn't fancy it. It's not something you want to hear, but we can think it. And I do think it, and I think that's what I try and do to try and get a bit of an edge with those races.
Just one more note: have you ever run into trouble with owners or connectors of horses after comments that you've made about them? Because you have to be analytical, you have to be brutal. If a horse doesn't go through with its effort, it's part of your job essentially to say that on the podcast. Have you ever had pushback from owners or connections about that?
All the time, yeah. We get a lot at the Post, and it was something that struck me a lot actually when I moved from Timeform across to the Post. You never got it at Timeform. I don't know whether it was we've got a greater readership at the Post or a broader readership, or the fact that everybody expects Timeform to behave like that. But I found that I moderated my language a little bit at the Post, and we still got a lot of people. I got a phone call once from a prominent flat jockey who had words with me about, I'd use the term poorly placed on a horse of his at Catterick. Had been held up in a steadily run race, and I used poorly placed. And apparently, but what you're getting is the owners have seen that, and the owners have misunderstood, because everybody knows that poorly placed means, tactically. It was just a horse that, and I know the jockey's probably given those instructions, hold him up, and whether he could have reacted to race conditions is neither here nor there. But you put poorly placed, it's an understood term. But when the owner, what you're getting in a lot of those cases is second-hand criticism. And it's part of the gig really. But you just try and, as you know yourself, there are definitely ways and means of saying certain things without saying them, and you just have to use that as much as you possibly can. I'm sure everybody watching this can think of their own certain few favourites of euphemisms that we'd use in terms of how they analyze horse performances, and it means that fewer people get offended by it, and also that everybody that does seem to know can pick up on what it is. Although I'm generally against this idea of nodding a wink in racing. I'm afraid politically it's a little bit inevitable with those things.
Indeed. Thank you very much for a fascinating part one, Keith Melrose.